think it's important to take that 30,000 foot view of where you are from a marketing standpoint. One of the things we talk about a lot is what percentage of your work comes from what group, how much comes from agents, contractors, et cetera. We kind of like to use that 40% number. If you have a particular group that's giving you more than 40%, not that it's necessarily a problem, but it's something you need to pay attention to. It can be dangerous, as we talked before, to have too many eggs in one basket. I think the size of your company is also something you need to consider when you're marketing, very much so, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as the screens progress here. And where's your marketing comfortable? It's interesting observing different companies and different tactics as well as ourselves. And one of the things I've noticed that if we break it down to an individual marketing rep, it seems like the rep, and sometimes even the owner of the company or just the company in general, seems to be more comfortable in one area or the other. And I could kind of subdivide that probably most generally by saying either more comfortable with blue collar marketing like contractors, plumbers, roofers, that sort of thing, or more comfortable with the white collar marketing, agents, adjusters, property managers, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with either of those groups, but I think it's important that you take a look at yourself and your rep or representatives that do your marketing and make sure that the people are marketing to people that they're comfortable with. When we decide to target a particular industry like plumbers or property managers or what have you, we have to really look at the viability of that industry in our particular marketplace. And that really subdivides into a lot of things. Of course, budget is always one of the things, time frame, but one of the things that I think is really important is how much blue ocean is in front of you. In other words, let's look at a particular group, and for PowerDry, the lesson we just learned certainly was in plumbers. We already have a very good grasp, as most of you know, in the plumbing market in our city. And we put a very strong marketing push towards plumbers and learned that the expensive way, of course, because that's how I learned my lessons, that there was not a lot of blue ocean in front of us. In other words, we already had such a decent market share of the residential repair plumbers in our market area that spending more money and time on a tremendous amount of plumber marketing for us turned out to be not very fruitful. So I think it's important to know how much is in front of you, not just by how much you have, but how much there is altogether and what percentage of you have, because there's certainly a point with every marketing industry or target industry. There's a point of diminishing returns, and I think it's difficult to find that point, but I think it's something that's important that you sort of pay attention to. So what industry do you want to target? You've looked at it and said, hey, we're a little heavy here, a little light there. Let's look at some of these other groups. The good news about that is the list of groups literally virtually never ends. A lot of these blue collar groups especially are in one of our clamshells that's almost never really talked about or used very much, but contractors and specialized contractors, we talk about roofers, hardwood floor, carpet stores, things of that nature. A lot of these targets, they might not be big in size like plumbing companies, but a lot of them have a lot of blue ocean. In other words, there's not 15,000 other contractors all beating down the door to get to some of these groups. So I think it's important that we kind of keep an open mind about some of that stuff. So once we've decided, hey, this is the industry or industries that we're going to kind of push our targeting to for now, obviously it always starts with purchasing lists and trying to build that name list, that group of people that we're going after. Internet's a big tool there, as all of you know. And as always, that initial data is really not reliable. It's very raw, and we have to really clean that up and scrub it out as normal. So what we do here is say, hey, let's look at the geography first. Let's try to break this down into something that we can turn into routes. Is there enough targets in there that there's more than one route? Are some of these businesses just too far away? You know, what makes sense here? Is it going to take 2 reps to do this, or is it going to take 1 rep a half a day a week? It just depends on the particular industry that you're going after. A lot of people are on those lists that are no longer in business, of course, and sometimes, especially when we're talking about carpet cleaners, you may have some competitors in there. Another thing we see a lot of, especially in the blue-collar world, is a lot of these addresses are residential. And then relevance to our company. Are they a plumber? Yes, but maybe they only do new construction. And if they do new construction, literally what percentage of their work is new construction? Because a company that does 50% new construction and 50% repair, that's a pretty viable target. When you get a company that does 90% new construction and 10% repair, well, that may change that answer for your particular company. And of course, you're the only one that can answer that. But these are questions that have to be answered on a single business at a time type of process. So now that we have this industry, we've got our list, we've kind of pre-scrubbed in our office. In other words, we've looked up all the addresses to make sure they're still in business. We've made some calls. We've tried to eliminate the geographical areas that don't make sense for us. We've tried to find out what's a house and what's an actual business. Well, now how many addresses are viable for our company? I mean, we did some work not too long ago on fire suppression or fire sprinkler companies. And in our small town here of a couple million people, there was really only 6 or 8 viable targets for our company. So, that's an entire industry, but the number of targets obviously was very, very small. So you may be looking at an industry with too few targets that may need to be combined with another industry, or you may be looking at an industry that's just too big and you may need to chunk it down. So how many targets are viable is a very important thing as far as your marketing budget time and that thing is concerned. So you really need to start putting the shotgun away at this point and kind of using the scope a little bit more. I mean, we have a limited amount of time, we have a limited amount of money, and the closer we are to people that are likely to give us work, obviously, the more successful we're going to be. And really, that's what this is all about. So what we like to do is after all that work we've done, we've basically just made routes of what we think by sitting our happy butts in our office are our most likely targets within any given industry. But the only true way to know is actually to build a route and send a rep out and run those routes. And for us, usually it's 2 or 3 times of running through that route to get a true feeling of, with all of these people and all these addresses, what are our true targets? And we have a very simple process of identifying them I'm going to talk about in the next screen. But I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is there's only one way to really know who a true target is, and that is to go out and look that person or that business in the eye. So the most important part is to find the targets that are most likely to give you work within this pre-screened group of targets that we have, and then simply note that. So we use a very simple process here. We either mark our candidates A, which means they're active. So we're still obviously going to continue to market an active company. That's somebody who already gives us work. Or B, and B for us means this is our most likely marketing target. That's where we're going to focus the majority of our efforts within this particular industry or group that we're going after. So B for us, that becomes the bullseye of what we're going after. And then we also have C, and C means we don't think that this is a very good target for us. And sometimes that doesn't mean that the company doesn't do what we're looking for. In other words, if we're talking about plumbers, it doesn't mean that they're a C because they do new construction. Obviously they would be if that was the case, but it could be as something as simple as we just don't seem to have the chemistry. The rep just doesn't feel like this is a good place to spend our time, money, and effort. So there's lots of reasons why somebody could become a B or a C, but at the end of the day, you got to categorize them. So maybe it's an insurance agent and they mostly sell auto insurance. It just doesn't make sense. Maybe the personality between yourself, your rep, and the target, just no chemistry there. It just doesn't work. Or maybe this is somebody that you really want to go after, even though it might normally be a C, because there's something like, hey, next to this building, there's a wholesaler. So let's try extra hard. And even though this person might normally be a C, let's put them a B because we really, really want to try to get to this target for whatever that reason is. And even though, we did our homework on these addresses, sometimes still you just don't know until you pull up and see what you've got on your hands.